Thanks very much. I will take a cue from your speech, sir, and begin by posing some questions to you, Mr. Seth. You spoke about the India growth story. You spoke about noisy democracy. I'm going to come to that in just a bit. But just because you touched upon growth, Mr. Seth, if I may ask you, who killed the India growth story? A large part of the blame may lie on the government. I'm sure industry will have a view on that. But where did the India story get killed along the way, and who killed it?
Good attempt. So, India is alive and kicking, and the India story is alive and kicking. So I can say very firmly that the India story is not dead. It's not killed. It's like beauty. So
Sir, a 4% growth or a 5% growth versus 9% isn't relative. Beauty is relative.
no, I said beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. So it's no one's case that the growth has slowed down. It's no one's case that we cannot grow faster. The world witnessed a dramatic slowdown, which a very recent publication, one book published in the US, said that it was a perfect storm, what happened in 2008, 2009, where there was a confluence of so many factors. There was factors which sort of conspired, if you will, to have a situation where the economy around the world was in trouble. I think we didn't do too badly in 2008, 2009, despite the fact that some of the countries in the West, especially in the USA, were in difficulty. We were also in difficulty, and I'm not saying that we ride out of it, but so and it was not something that the industry alone did or the government alone did. I think it was a combination of factors. We got together and we did manage to acquit ourselves reasonably okay. Now, growth after that has fallen, and it's a big challenge. I agree with you. It's a big challenge. But if you look at the, I don't want to say now that the fundamentals are sound. Of course they are, but I'm not want to say it because you'll say, oh, we have heard this. So, but they are sound, and I think perception to hum aur aap banate hain milkar. If you will it that way, that it's all doom and gloom, and that's the way you look at it. So I think the way we have to address this issue is, okay, we are in this difficulty. We have to let's get out of this. And how do we get out of it? I think and it's not just. I mean, I don't want to. We shouldn't have in our discourse an us versus them sort of attitude. I mean, this is something which we have to partner together. And the media plays a role in this, the government plays a role, the industry and trade plays a role. So we have to, I think, definitely overcome this challenge and increase the rate of growth. And the steps that are being taken, I think, will yield results, and we will see already. I think in many fundamentals you are beginning to see slight improvements. Somebody will say, oh no, this is just it's too early to say just now. Well, I'm not using any hyperbole. I'm just saying that I'm optimistic, and I'd urge, and I'm sure many of you are too. Your life depends on it. You better be. So I think we'll pull out of this.
I'm told you're going to leave early, so my first few questions directed at you. You spoke about noisy democracy. India on the move is perhaps the debate that we are all doing here, but India is in transition isn't a debate, which is why I want to ask you, as some of India's top bureaucrats sitting here and you, their big boss, the debate is about India on the move, but how much noise and cacophony there is around, and how much distraction there is in decision making, sir, before you get your phone back?
My life depends on this one.
I was asking you how much, sorry. Can you repeat your question? My question really is about the noise that you mentioned, the noise and the cacophony around. How much of a distraction that there is in decision making owing to those two things? There is plenty of noise, there's no denying that.
Noise is a
So we'll just have the mic. No.
no noise. Noise is a yeah. I've been a student of physics, so noise not in the sense of a noise in social discourse, but there's activity, and there's a lot that you can pick out from various activities, various people saying various things. It's a good thing. It's our strength, and I think we shouldn't we shouldn't discourage debate. We shouldn't discourage dissent. That's our strength. That's the strength of any democracy, and I think we are very proud of this fact that we encourage all different views. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I don't think this is necessarily pulling us back. I mean, we just get a different perspective, but then we should be very clear what our objectives are, and as long as we do that, I don't see there's going to be any difficulty.
I'm going to take a cue from what you said, which is noise is perhaps one of the strengths. The fact that we debate decisions is a strength. Mr. Ray, if I may point this question to you, just last night the cabinet took the decision to hike gas prices. Now everybody in India seems to have a view on this. Your ministry had the view, finance ministry had a view, Arvind Kejriwal seems to have a view on gas prices, but eventually we did go ahead with the decision that had been made, perhaps in the right wisdom. The question though is, Mr. Seth says this is our strength. The noise and the cacophony around decision making is our strength. The fact that we are not a China, we are not autocratic. Would you stand by that? Did you feel the strength when your decision was being debated in public grade? It was completely scrutinized by everybody. What's their salt?
Well, I think it was very useful to get feedback from different perspectives and different stakeholders. And there's no shortage of feedback in this country. So in a sense, policy making in this country is therefore more robust because it listens, it takes note of what everybody is saying and then comes up with a policy decision. And this decision was taken in June 2013. This decision was not taken yesterday. It just happened that there were certain issues raised after the decision was taken which needed to be thrashed out in great detail. And therefore, we took some more time to consult various ministries. But it's a complex decision. There is a wide divergence of opinion on what needs to be done. But having considered all the aspects, the decision has been taken. And I would say that in the oil and gas sector, this is a landmark decision. And this is a decision which has the potential to transform the energy landscape of the country.
We'll see when the NELP 10 rounds occur and the participants who come in. I'm going to grill you further on that. Yes, sir, we'll take your leave, sir. We'll keep the debate going, and Mr. Chandra, I will come to you because your decision a few months back, if I may say almost a year back, about FDI and multi-brand retail created similar furore. Everybody had a view on this. It got stuck in political crossfires. We recently have Tesco who's come calling. Do you in that sense, did the bureaucracy stand vindicated when there's finally decision that's taken and finally action follows that?
Failure is an orphan. We got enough brickbats. We've got a few bouquets for the Tesco proposal. But what I must point out is that the series of FDI initiatives which have been taken have been globally recognized. In addition to the 3 reports which I've been referring to earlier, the Ernst & Young Attractiveness Survey has put India at the top position. And the latest World Investment and Political Risk report published by the World Bank has concluded that after these policy initiatives, India remains a very attractive investment destination. There's been a lot of action in a number of sectors: aviation, single brand trade, telecom, pharma. In addition, all the MNCs which have been here have shown confidence in the Indian economy, whether it's Unilever or GSK, both in the pharma and consumer goods space, or Cairn, all of them with their buyback offers would suggest that the India's long-term story is intact.
That's true. The long-term story is intact, but I would want to pose this question to you, Ms. Singh. You interact a lot with the outside world. The Cabinet Secretary just made a mention of perception versus evidence, perception versus reality. Are we in India paying a price for poor perception? Are things, I don't know what the industry will say here, but are things a little better on the ground than they really are to be perceived?
I think there's no doubt whatsoever that things are better on the ground than they are actually perceived. A year back, I was ambassador in Germany, and there was a presentation, a panel discussion like this, and somebody just read out from the headlines in Indian newspapers on all the negatives that seem to be taking the shine off the India growth story. And then we came to the survey that was done, the annual survey that was done by the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, and it showed that German companies felt that the business environment had got more difficult, but that they continued to be making a healthy profit. So what does that say to you? I think that there is a perception, there is a reality, and the perception is something that we have to seek to overcome in terms of making sure that it correlates with reality. And I think that is where my ministry plays a very important role in making sure that that message goes across.
That's a fair point indeed, that perception will follow reality. But Mr. Ray, if I may ask you, while we are discussing perception, while we are discussing reality, how does a bureaucrat, somebody like in your position or like your colleagues here on this dais, how do you make that fine balance between creating the right perception and yet balancing out the business interest, which is in any case required for a thriving economy? Because more than once companies, more than once actually the civil society seems to accuse bureaucrats and ministers and politicians of favoring business interests, but that is the reality that we've got to live with. There will be business interests that will have to be taken care of. And the perception gets built around that.
Well, whatever you do, there needs to be clarity of objective. You've got to be clear about where you want to be getting to, because if you're not clear about where you want to get to, it doesn't matter where you get to. And that's Alice in Wonderland. So you have to be clear about what your objective is. As far as the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas is concerned, we are clear. Our objective is to find more oil and gas in this country, and also to acquire assets abroad. That's our key objective, and every decision we take has to pass the test of whether it facilitates and promotes that objective or not. And we often get sidetracked by subsidiary objectives, and that's the problem. We've loaded the growth engine with a large number of other objectives, and therefore we've lost in the noise of democracy. Everybody has his own favorite objective or favorite hobby horse. And the centrality of the growth objective has therefore been weakened and diluted. And this is a bit like an overloaded DTC bus or an overloaded truck, where the growth engine is sputtering because it's overloaded with objectives. And therefore it's very important, I think, for any policy maker or any decision maker to have clarity about what is the fundamental objective. And there could be other objectives. I'm not saying that you can't have any other objectives. But what is the trade-off between those objectives, and how do you then balance it out? And unless we get that right, we are trying to do too much with limited resources, and thereby we are obfuscating, we are diffusing, we are diluting, and we are not achieving what we want to do. So I would say that as far as I'm concerned, our objective is clear. We have no problem in taking a decision, because we know what we want to do, and if it facilitates that decision, we take it. So it doesn't in any way, the noise does not in any way constrain what we are doing. And we've done a lot over the last 1 year. I have a laundry list of things which I could share with you, but it's been a period of hyperactivity. It's been a period of considerable and significant progress. And our stakeholders, among other stakeholders, are the oil and gas companies, Indian companies as also foreign companies and multinationals. And we had an interaction with them about a month ago in Mumbai. And they said that over the last 12 months, they've moved from pessimism to cautious optimism. They haven't moved to optimism as yet, but they said they do acknowledge that they moved from pessimism to cautious optimism. So there is a turnaround in the way they see the whole story unfolding, and that's simply because there is clarity of objective. And I would make bold to say that we are not constrained by the noise of democracy. We listen to everybody carefully, but we take our decisions, and the decisions that have been taken are before you. And there are very controversial decisions. There are decisions that have huge financial implications. We've done the largest acquisition that the country has ever done. One was $5 billion in Kazakhstan, which of course we didn't get because the Kazakh government preempted the right to buy it and sell it to the Chinese. But we're just about signing a deal with Mozambique, in Mozambique with some companies at $5.5 billion, which is a direct acquisition of a participating interest in a gas field. That's 30,000 crores. Now that's a big decision. It's not through a tender, it's not through a bid, it's through a direct negotiation. So you've got to make sure that you've got your risks factored in. You've looked at the strategic risks, the political risks, the geological risks, the financial risks, the risks of this decision being subjected to forensic audit or forensic investigation by the CAG and the CBI 5 years down the road. But the decision has been taken because we feel that we need to do something for the energy the energy security of the country. So briefly, the short point is that if you know what you want to do, you don't get distracted.
You took me to my next question because you spoke about CAG and CBI. I did not bring it up. Ms. Singh, if I may ask you, ma'am,
I spoke about forensic audit.
All right, we're talking about forensic audit. When we talk about CAG and CBI, ma'am, we've seen institutional activism come up to fore in India in the last 2-3 odd years. We've also seen the civil society activism come up. Do you think, and of course, many people believe this is a phase in our democracy, this is a phase in our economy. It must be gone through because this cleans up the system. But from an economic point of view, are we paying a price for this cleanup? Are we paying a price for this sort of an activism?
Well, that's surely for members of your audience to answer. But the fact remains that in the conduct of our foreign policy and in the manner in which we project what is happening in India overseas, we think it's a great source of strength. We think that the churning that India is going through, and there's no doubt that that is precisely what's happening here right now, is something that will, in the medium to long term, that is how we project it. And this is what I also personally believe, that it will add strength to our institutions in making them more transparent, in making them more responsive to all the stakeholders. And institutional activism, of course, why not? I think that there are institutions and institutions, and we have to respond to their activism in a manner that meets all stakeholders' interests.
That's a fair point. I mean, when you talk about foreign policy, you have a very fair point that this is something that you perhaps would want to put across the world. But Mrs. Chandra, if I may come to you, it's perhaps easy for senior bureaucrats like yourselves who are present here to make decisions and to perhaps be prepared to bear the brunt. But have you seen, and I'm going to be, and at the cost of sounding repetitive, I'm going to go back to institutional activism. Have you seen at lower bureaucracy, are people hesitant to take decisions, joint secretaries, directors, DDGs, because you never know, a file that you may sign today, you may be held accountable for 20 years down the line.
There are no bad soldiers. There are only bad generals.
We feel very sorry for you.
So if the secretary believes in what he is doing, I think his joint secretaries and the lower formations also believe in his ability to take it forward. Let me mention that all decisions, and for that matter all policy, will adversely affect somebody and would benefit others. It is finally a balance of convenience. Where does the balance of convenience lies? Is it in larger public interest? And as long as that is guiding policy formulation, it would be questioned. There will be court cases by vested interests. We've been fighting quite a few of them. But nevertheless, it's a question of believing in yourself, making your team believe in what you are doing, and after that, the number of decisions that have been taken in the government, I can talk about my department, has been fairly large, whether it is in the FDI policy space or in the manufacturing policy environment or in the intellectual policy regime. Decisions have been taken. They've been hard decisions. They've been difficult decisions. We faced a lot of flack, but touch wood, till date, nobody has really questioned the motives behind those decisions.
We can only keep our fingers crossed. It won't be questioned 10 years down the line either. Ms. Singh, if I may come to you on this part of the discussion, RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan just a couple of days back said something and it rings a bell, and which is why I'm asking you. Are we a third world country with first world aspirations? And because you deal with the outside world a lot more than most other people do, do you believe we have aspirations of a third world country, but we want to do things like the US and UK do it? We want to grow at 10%, but we also want to take environment and forest clearances along without offending any sentiment present in this room about green energy here. The fact is that can India and US or India and UK have the same parameters of environment clearances given the fact that we are a developing nation, given the fact that we need to grow, we want to grow at 9%, but we also want to take care of this?
I think the fact is that we are a developing country. We have made no pretensions to be anything other than a developing country that is slowly but surely emerging on the world stage. And whether you call it first world aspirations, the fact is, why would one just confine it to the first world? Isn't it the aspiration of any person, any human being, any citizen, whether he's from a developing country or a developed country, to have a certain basic minimum standard of living? And that is where the realities versus the perceptions come out. I think the reality is that, and this is something that we often forget when we look at what we have achieved, whether it's even a 4% rate of growth, is that we are in the middle of an enterprise that is without historic precedent anywhere in the world, of a nation, of an economy of 1.2 billion people, working towards improving the standards of living of its citizens within a framework of democracy and pluralism. And this, including your institutional strengths, the fact of whether it's your bureaucracy, the framework, the decision-making process, it has its downside, but ultimately it is an institutional strength. And I'm afraid that this seems to be appreciated much more overseas than it is here within India itself, because they see the complexities of what we do and what we are trying to achieve. And it is this that we need to always keep in mind. I think there is absolutely nothing wrong with having first world aspirations. And whether you call it first world aspirations or third world aspirations, you have to take climate change into account. You have to take food security into account. And that is what the Ministry of External Affairs, in its economic diplomacy, in its attempt to create a conducive global economic environment for India's economic development and progress, is focusing on in climate change negotiations, in the Conference of Parties, in Bali, working along with our colleagues in the Ministry of Commerce, whether it's food security, whether it's promoting trade, whether it's promoting investment. And in this, I think that we need to be very clear that we have to have a very clear picture of our strengths and of our weaknesses. So in that context, perhaps Governor RBI's statement was not completely off the mark. We really need to know what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, what the opportunities are, and what the challenges are.
Taking cognizance of challenges, I'm going to take a cue from your answer and pose it to Mr. Ray here. She mentioned about the view from the outside world about India is much better than our view of ourselves. We talk about growth. I'm sure those are the questions that are going to be asked in some time from now. We will perhaps grow at about 5%. 2 points here, 2 points there. Are we as a nation obsessed with decimal points growth? Because 5% doesn't seem to be meaningful. I mean, to almost everybody you ask in this room here, including myself, I would perhaps say, oh my God, our growth has dipped down to 5%. Which other country in the world is growing at that rate?
Well, there are not many countries growing at 5%. So we are doing pretty well compared to many countries in the world. But it's not good enough as far as our own aspirations are concerned. But before I get into this, if we have a third world country with first world aspirations, it takes 30 days to get environment clearance to dig a well in the United States. It takes 30 months in India. So I hope we have those aspirations and we can actually rejig our environmental clearance process so that we can, I would say that if we don't have those aspirations, we need to acquire those aspirations. So we are doing pretty well compared to many countries in the world. But it's not good enough as far as our own aspirations are concerned. But before I get into this, if we have a third world country with first world aspirations, it takes 30 days to get environment clearance to dig a well in the United States. It takes 30 months in India. So I hope we have those aspirations and we can actually rejig our environmental clearance process so that we can, I would say that if we don't have those aspirations, we need to acquire those aspirations pretty quickly. And so when we look at the best practices and the business practices in many of the first world countries, that's really where we should be looking at to see how we can do business better and move our ranking from 134 in ease of doing business to somewhere in the first quartile. But as far as growth is concerned, it's single digits or double digits or 2 decimal places is not the issue. There are more fundamental issues here, and that is an unending debate about growth versus equity or growth versus social justice, and it's been played out with great economists in the media, political parties and so on. So the dilemma for India is how to resolve this trade-off between growth and social justice, or growth and equity, or inclusive growth, whatever that might mean. That is the fundamental issue. And in that process, we keep trying to achieve both, and we are probably thereby not being able to achieve the targets that we fixed for ourselves. We were saving about 36 or 37% of GDP. I think it's down to 33% of GDP. It was at 24% for about 25 years. Investment and savings were 22, 24% for 35 years. And we were growing at about 3 to 4%. That is the Hindu rate of growth. But then we went up from 24% to 34, 35% in the last decade. And the peak, I think, was at 38%. For investments and about 36% for savings. But we are now down, we've slipped. And we've slipped because government dis-saving has increased, government spending has gone up, government is not saving any money, government is running a huge fiscal deficit, and corporate investment sentiment has soured. And households are now putting money not into physical assets, but not into financial assets, but into physical assets. So that is the challenge that the country faces. How does the country invest more? How does the country create more investment capacity? Not how the country consumes more and by printing more notes. Our savings rates at 33%, so our consumption is 67%, with plus minus 1 or 2% for FDI. But China, the Southeast Asian tigers, all these countries have been investing at 45 to 50% of GDP consistently for over 3 decades. So if you're looking for growth, you've got to invest more and you've got to consume less. If you don't do that, you're not going to have growth. It's not a matter of double digits or decimal points. It's a question of how much you're consuming, how much you're investing, and how much you're saving. And that is the amount you consume is again linked with the trade-off between growth and equity. Because if you want people to consume and you want to give out subsidies so that they can consume, you can't have growth. The two don't go together. So the fundamental dilemma is of growth versus equity, and that is a matter which can be, is difficult to resolve. I'm a growth fundamentalist. I have my position on this, and the stage of development that this country is at, we need to be growing at 10% per year for the next 25, 30 years to be able to banish poverty from this country. And we hope that this growth process will also, a rising tide lifts all boats. So that growth process will lift all kinds of boats. And if it doesn't, then we will see. But to want to cater to the needs of the larger society without growth is an impossibility. And that is the contradiction that we are faced with right now. That is why we have a high fiscal deficit. That's why we have a high current account deficit. That's why we have lack of investor confidence. That's why we have people wanting to invest abroad and not wanting to invest in the country.
Just to take a cue from investments, Mr. Chandra, I'm going to come to you. You meet domestic and foreign players regularly. If I may ask you this question, how have concerns changed in the last 6 months? We're discussing India on the move. Yes, there are problems, but like someone said here, the fundamentals still remain very strong. We have a demographic dividend. We are where the market wants to go. What are some of the concerns that industry has been raising with you, and how have those changed domestic vis-a-vis foreign players?
Before I answer that question, I really don't know what is this debate between growth and social justice is all about. Because without growth, you're not going to have inclusiveness or development. Growth is a necessary condition. Everything else follows. So it may be something which academically you can debate, but without growth, you're not getting out of the kind of income levels that we have. A 10% growth means you double your income in about 7 years, and we have to grow like that for 30 years. Without that, well, we continue to remain where we are. The other issue about perceptions, I have just referred to 2 reports, and the perception outside appears to be better than the perception within the country. Now the question is, what does it take to change the perception within the country? And that is where I suppose the media has a very important role to play. The measures that have been taken. The topic for this session is India on the move. What does it take to make India on the move? Well, India, to start with, if you were to compare it to a wheeler, the first wheel is highways. Highways are the fate lines of the country. If you were to go on to a 2-wheeler, then you'll probably need the 2 dedicated freight corridors, which will cut down the time for transporting goods from the hinterland to the ports from the 15 odd days that it takes today to 24 odd hours. As far as manufacturing is concerned, the 3 wheels, as I would look at it, would be the FDI policy, the manufacturing policy, and the IP policy. And to take it forward on the 4 wheels would be the 4 industrial corridors. We have to get them moving, and the traction will have to be provided by institutions like the Cabinet Committee on Investment. So the perception has abroad changed. In India, we have to recognize that a number of decisions have been taken in the last 1 year. There is a phase lag. It will take time, but the results should be forthcoming. Some of them are visible. The gross fixed capital formation has improved. Exports have picked up. The rupee has stabilized. There is some stability in the wholesale price index. My belief is that the coming quarters would be much better.
We all hope for that, don't we? I've been very tempted to ask Ms. Singh this question ever since she walked in. and there's perhaps no better time than this debate to pose this question to you. It's perhaps for the first time that we're actually seeing India look into the eye of the United States, dare it at one level. Is this really grandstanding by our government going into elections, or do you think really this is the emergence of or signs of an emerging superpower market?
A classic instance of media putting a spin on what is completely a question of diplomatic courtesies being extended to an Indian diplomat. You do not treat an Indian diplomat under these circumstances, whether it is in the United States or any other country in the world. We expect our diplomats to be given exactly the same courtesies that we extend to American diplomats and indeed to diplomats from all other countries in the world. That is the nub of the matter.
But ma'am, a lot of people will want to question you on this, that we've never really shown this kind of a spine, if I may quote a leading newspaper. Is this, and which is why I'm asking you, is this a sign of our confidence? The confidence that we may have just got, the confidence that we get because we know we are a rising superpower? Does that really emanate from the confidence? I know it's diplomatic, it's a diplomatic issue, but we've never really taken on another nation like this.
I'm sorry, I question the very basis of your question. India has shown spine ever since she got independence in 1947. We have shown spine in everything that we have done, including in forging our own foreign policy, in taking our own decisions, whether it is on non-alignment, whether it is on Bangladesh, whether it is on all the issues that have followed since. Please look at the history of what India has done, whether it is in economic policy, whether it is on any other issue. We have always followed our own path. And we have followed it determined by our national interest and by how we see the world, and we continue to do so.
We do hope and we wish you all the success with this row with the United States. But if I may just stick with you and talk about perceptions and talk about profits. Profits seems to be this bad word here in India. If you actually see the delegation that comes with head of states from a United Kingdom or a Russia, we really see the top businessmen travel with them. The agenda is very clear. If a Vodafone is in a row with India, the United Kingdom's Prime Minister will write a letter to our Prime Minister. Why are our politicians, or why is our establishment, politicians perhaps the wrong word, but why is our state so hesitant to be seen on the same side as businessmen? Is this again about perception? Is this about, we don't see this happening anywhere around the world other than us.
Well, again, I'll question you. I think, you know, I need to give you a tutorial on Indian foreign policy and how we conduct.
I'll be happy to take one. I'll be happy to take one.
You're on. You know, any diplomat, any serving diplomat spends a good amount of his or her time in promoting India's economic interests, and you cannot promote India's economic interests without actually taking up the cause of Indian trade and industry. Many of the people here in this room I know from earlier assignments, and whether I was in Germany, whether I was in Australia, I worked together with our companies who are investing in that country. The embassy is a port of call. If they have any difficulties, when I was in Washington recently, a good part of my time was spent in talking about the immigration bill, about the fact that it would impact on our IT. So please be under no illusion that we like to keep a distance from business. Absolutely not. Promoting our business interests, trade and investment is a core policy, is a core part, an integral part of what we do in the Ministry of External Affairs.
It's perhaps easier for you because you had foreign policy, but if I may question Mr. Ray and Mr. Chandra on the same thing, I mean, answer this question for me. Vodafone is backed by its government, but there is a certain amount of hesitancy when you have to back your own businessmen domestically or overseas. Would you agree with me, Mr. Ray?
Well, I think there is some merit in what you say, and for various reasons, we find it a bit difficult to openly support a particular business group or a business house, and that's, I think, a cultural issue. It's not a that's an issue that goes deep into the Indian psyche and into our the way we look at money making, the way we look at trade, the way we look at business, and that is the dilemma we face all the time. Because when you take any decision, as Saurabh was saying, somebody benefits and somebody loses. And sometimes, if you take a decision quickly to help somebody, you're interrogated to find out why you took that decision so quickly. So there is a huge problem in taking quick decisions. And so whenever I meet investors in the country, both foreign and Indian companies, there's one rule here: you must have patience, because we are going to take a lot of time to take a decision.
Mr. Chandra,
Because otherwise I would be hanged by the CBI 5 years down the road, saying that why did you take the decision so quickly? Now what do you do with this? I don't know.
so the whole merit and argument of quick decision making is thrown out of the window. But Mr. Chandra, do you share that perspective, and do you also tell potential investors, both domestic and private, hold your horses, be patient with us, but then you may let a Walmart go out of India and never come in?
We've been talking to individual investors. There is a Foreign Investment Implementation Authority where we have been taking up cases. A large number of private sector cases have gone to the Cabinet Committee on Investment. The sector that we deal with, whether it is cement or paper, we have taken cases. So while there is some merit in it, because when you start doing this, your motives are questioned. Why are you doing it? The way the milieu is today, or the way things have evolved over the years, it does raise doubts about your intentions of doing so. But nevertheless, a number of cases of private business have been taken up. But it's much easier dealing with the policy space.
We're completely out of time here. I'm sorry, all you gentlemen who I cannot come to for questions. I will hand it over to Ms. Naina Lal-Kidwai for her closing remarks.
Well, we've come to the close of a very interesting, very lively session. And on behalf of all those present here, I'd like to thank all our senior secretaries to the Government of India who are with us today. I must say I was quite struck by your turn of phrase and indeed almost poetic renditions of reasons why we are where we are, quoting Alice in Wonderland, or indeed no bad soldiers, only bad generals, and so on. I think while we look at this, I have also learnt a new phrase, and I'm delighted actually that while I call myself a growth fundamentalist, that we also have in those of you on the panel today, growth fundamentalists, because hearing the dialogue today, there was really little that was different between what industry sees and wants and what you have stated as what India needs in order to march forward. So what's the missing link? Why are we not being able to get where we need to get? Is it just the political agenda, or is there something else? And I think this is where we have to begin to bury down into the detail. And why can't CBI have questions as to why things took too long? Why can't there be, from every ministry, a 30-day and that is it sort of benchmark, and you actually get audits? I mean, we audit our people in our organizations on why things take too long. They do get questioned. And I do think we have to therefore push for creating that next level of whatever it is that helps you deliver your job in order to get our jobs done. I think clearly, I unashamedly and unabashedly admit to being an environmentalist, but I cannot understand a strategy which goes from go-go, which it should never have been, a go-go era where any regulation and everything just went out of the window and anything and everything was possible, to a no-go era. So ultimately, it is about balance. And we have to get back to that balance where we mine coal, but we mine it in an environment-friendly way, without raising the cost to a point where it is not profitable or acceptable. And I think it is about finding that balance that you, as senior bureaucrats and industry have to sit together and rechart the course, because otherwise we will go into this madness of swinging from one end of the pendulum to the other and get the result as we have. We clearly have to change the dialogue on land, labor, capital. There's no doubt that we are seen as a very attractive country. The ENY study that was alluded to puts us right on top of every country in the world in terms of attractiveness. Yet, we are at the bottom in terms of doing business. We have to close this gap, and I think we do have to address this in terms of how we translate the attractiveness to real business and growth therein. The whole issue of the regular supply of energy, and I must congratulate Secretary Petroleum for actually seeing through what at FICCI we've always pushed for, and that is the gas pricing agenda going forward. You have stayed the course, and I do think the result is something that we will benefit from. And we certainly want to see the digging of those wells down to the 30-day benchmark you suggested is a developed country aspiration, and I think very well put by you. So we are where we are because we have got stuck on the execution. We know the solutions. We have a joint aspiration, and I think it is for us to work together as we get there. Our Foreign Secretary very accurately pointed out that there is clearly a congruence of the economic agenda and foreign policy. But on this, there was, at our recent meeting with the heads of missions who were here and FICCI, there was a common belief expressed there that, and you heard it then and I will repeat it, that our overseas investments need both a push and protection from government, and this needs to come in a clear and forthright manner. So we need to do better, and I think on that note I shall end to say, let our aspirations of being a country as a developed country drive the agenda for us and make sure that we can deliver on benchmarks that we want in our own Indian way, but benchmarks we absolutely want to embrace. So on that note, I thank all of you and a wonderful moderator for making sure that the session remained as lively as it did. And thank you all